Hey, welcome to Widowed Too Soon. I am Mark Massaro, and I'm here with my co-host and friend, Michelle Bader. And Michelle from Washington is going to tell us about her story and the incredible journey that she has been on. Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Well, I am happy to be here today. It is a good day. So, I'm excited to share my story with the audience about my husband's journey through cancer and God's faithfulness. I have been a widow for 11 months and 2 days, and it's been a journey. So, I really want to have a chance to share what God brought me through in the last 16 years because it's been a long journey. So, I'm going to start way back because my husband and I met in high school, believe it or not. Back in the
Um,
day, I was a freshman, he was a sophomore, and he played baseball. I was a cheerleader. We both thought each other were cute, but we never dated in high school. And a few years later, well, he graduated, and I graduated, and we ran into each other through mutual friends in 2002. And he was 23 or 24, and I was 22. And, anyways, long story short, we fell in love. After 3 months, we were engaged. And looking back, it's totally God's timing. I had no idea, like everybody thought it was crazy. We got engaged so fast, but I'd known him like half of my life. And we decided to get married. And before we got married, he noticed that there was a lump in his ankle. So he was a mail carrier and he walked, I think it was 7 or 8 miles every day delivering mail. And so, yeah, it was crazy. He was like in such good shape, walking. He was athletic. He was a star baseball player. He was absolutely amazing. He had never been sick in his life. He'd had a few ear infections, like total picture of health, handsome, 6 feet tall, dark hair. I mean, he was amazing. And nothing had ever, been wrong with him as far as physically. He thought he was invincible. He used to talk about when he was in his 20s and he thought he was invincible, like when early 20s. And anyways, long story short, he saw something on his ankle starting to get bigger. And then we got married before we knew what that was. And he went to the doctor. Actually, I think before we got married, he went to the doctor and they said, it's tendonitis. You're young, you'll be fine. So we went along and it started getting bigger. We got married in August and had this beautiful, beautiful wedding, a gazebo, 300 people, twinkling lights, the whole thing. Actually, this is fun. Side note, when I was 13 or 14, my family went to the place we got married because they have Christmas lights. And I said, one day I'm going to get married here. And I did. So it was like a long dream of mine to get married there. And side note, we would go back every year with the kids because you could go back at Christmas. But anyways, so honeymoon, Maui, it was like everything was picture perfect. Like everyone said, we were like Barbie and Ken, this beautiful couple, like everything going for us. And then this lump in his ankle started getting bigger. So when we got married, I was 24 and he was 25. And he went back to the doctor in December, so a few months after we gotten married. In the in between time, between August and December, in November, we found out we were pregnant with our first child. Not our plan, but God's plan, and the timing is completely God. So we had something to focus on positive. And December, he went to the doctor and he told me he remembers them like calling. They had an X-ray of his ankle and they were like calling people in to look at it. And he said he could hear them whispering and saying, "Oh, that looks bad. How old is he? 25?" And he said that day he knew it was something bad. And he came and told me, and I didn't believe it was bad at all. Like I just thought, okay, well, I don't know what it is, but I never even thought the word cancer. Didn't know anything about cancer, just like you shared in your episode. Cancer was something. Actually, I wrote a book, and in my book I say cancer is something that you heard like a distant aunt had or a cousin. It wasn't something that was in my daily life. So anyways, ended up in January. So then he had his 26th birthday in December, and then in January we went and he had a biopsy on his ankle. For those of you not familiar, it's where they take a piece of the tumor. And so we knew he had a tumor. So we had already figured that out. I think maybe they had a scan. I don't remember the order of things. But they then had the biopsy in January and took a piece of it. It took a while. And I remember the doctor calling us. They said, we have to send this off to New York. It's something super rare. We don't know what
Wow.
it is. Yeah, it was crazy. And we had to wait. And then I remember the day that the doctor said, I need you both on the phone. So we knew it was bad. And she said, this is a very rare bone cancer called mesenchymal chondrosarcoma. And we're like, what? And all I recognized was sarcoma. It was a bone cancer. And she said, it's super rare. It's usually in kids. Like, we don't even know how to treat this. So we're going to, it was pretty much like, we're going to throw all this chemo at you and hope it works because we don't even know what to do with this. And it was like, so we talked over the phone, and then I remember meeting with the oncologist, and I remember it was a man, and just feeling like my whole world crushing. Like, I wanted, and they also told us that we'd never have any more kids because of the chemo. They told us a bunch of stuff, and I was crushed. I was pregnant at the time, but thinking about more kids, I always wanted a big family. And it was just the most crushing moment finding out my 26-year-old husband had bone cancer, like completely healthy, all of a sudden, bone cancer. Here's your chemo. You need to start immediately. It will last a year. It will be every, I think it was like every 3 weeks for 5 days. You'll stay in the hospital. It was intense. And I was like in a moment, just like you, the whole world changes. Like your whole world changes in
Mm-hmm.
a moment. And you're like, what? I remember like just sitting there pregnant, crying, like, this can't be real. This cannot be real.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was pretty crazy to be newlyweds. I mean, we always used to joke about, like, what do other they say the first year of marriage is so hard. We would hear people say that, and I'm like, wait, did you go through cancer? Like, what was so hard? Like, I never, like, Luke and I would always joke about that. Like, what was hard for them? I don't get it. So, anyways, so he started chemo right away. And I remember he had 5-day hospital stay, 24 hours a day. We had shared rooms. And I remember being with this man just screaming, and I'm sure he died soon after. It was horrible. And just, it was, so a whole wing was just
Hmm.
chemo wing, the chemo ward. And you would stay there overnight, and there were all these sick kids and sick people, and it was so depressing. And I,
Mm.
was pregnant, and I would cuddle up in his bed with him with the chemo going. And the chemo was so bad that they told me, like, you can't use the bathroom that he uses, but if you do, you have to flush it twice and then you can use it, because they were afraid of the chemicals getting me, and I'm pregnant. And
Wow.
yeah, I'm like, okay, so you're putting that in his body, but I can't
Yeah.
touch it. It's kind of crazy, like, just, yeah. And immediately I remember right after chemo, him throwing up, losing his hair, taste buds. He couldn't taste things, and he'd get sores in his mouth. And it
Mm.
was, it was crazy. So he went through several cycles of chemo, and then they did another scan and said it did not shrink at all. So then they came back to us and said, you have a couple choices to make. You can either, like, we need to do something with this cancer. It's not shrinking. So either we can remove the tumor and try to leave a big margin. No, just, it was just remove the tumor, and you can wear a special boot for the rest of your life. And we can just hope it doesn't come back, but it's pretty likely it'll come back if we just remove it. Or you can amputate your leg below the knee, giving it a bigger margin, and you'll be able to get a prosthetic leg and be more active than if you um, just take the tumor out. And I remember we hung up, it was a phone call. We just hung up and laid on the bed and cried, and like, how do we make this
Gosh,
decision? Like, my
that's
20,
crazy.
yeah. And looking back at it now, because I'm like, that's so young. Like, I was 24 at the time, he was 26. And just like, how do we make this decision? So we talked to a lot of people, our pastors, and prayed about it a lot, and decided to do the amputation. And a lot of it was because I was pregnant with Hayden, and he was like, I want to be there for him, and if this gives me a better chance at living longer, then I'm going to do it. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a hard decision. I remember us going up in front of the church right before his amputation, and them explaining it to everybody and praying over us. And I remember the night before his amputation, we went out to dinner, and I remember him saying to me, I need you to be strong for me. Like, because I was usually the one crying and all that stuff. He's like, I need you to not cry tomorrow. I need you to be strong. I was like, okay, okay, I can do it. And then I remember that feeling of walking in the hospital, holding his hand, looking at his feet, knowing it would be the last time that I would see him with
Mm.
2 legs.
Wow.
It was a really crazy feeling walking in. And then I remember like so many people from our church there, all of our families, and then walking in, to the prep room. And it's kind of funny. His mom took a Sharpie and wrote, so he had his right leg amputated, and on his left leg, she wrote, "Not this one," because she was afraid of the horror stories where they cut the wrong one off. I thought it was really funny. And
It's pretty
then
funny.
yeah, I remember him getting an epidural, and I left the room because I was like, I don't want to see what that's like because I'm gonna have one and soon, and I didn't want to know. And it was like they couldn't get it right, and I remember just sliding. So I'm outside of the door where he's getting it done and sliding down and falling onto the floor, just crying and crying. And oh no, that was when they wheeled him. So he kissed me goodbye, wheeled away, and then I just fell to the floor crying like in back in the pre-op. And I remember a nurse being like, "Are you okay? Like, do you have anybody here for you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I remember walking into the bathroom and I had this bracelet and it had pictures of me and Luke, and then a picture, well, it couldn't have been a Hayden yet. He wasn't born yet. So it was pictures of me and Luke. And then I remember like going to the bathroom and rubbing my belly and going, "Daddy will be okay, Hayden. Daddy will be okay. It's okay, Hayden. It's okay." And just like I can't explain what it felt like in that moment, knowing he was about to have his leg cut off. But what we tried to consider it was the last day he had cancer, and that was May 7th of 2004.
Mm.
We always, that was the anniversary of like cancer's gone. We would celebrate. So we tried to walk in there with a good attitude of like, this is the day cancer is going to be gone from your body. Because thankfully at that time, it was nowhere else in his body. It was only in his ankle. And that was amazing because usually it's other places too. The primary was his ankle. So
Did
went
they
through
do
the,
like a full body scan at that time or
yeah,
something?
yeah,
Yeah,
they
okay.
had, once they found it in his ankle, they did the full body scan to see if it was anywhere else. And thankfully, that was a praise that it wasn't at that time. So went through the amputation, and it was very awful seeing him. Like it was a
Mm.
long day, and then I was just scared of like what he would be like afterwards. But he had the best attitude, and every time, I forgot to say this, when he was in chemo, he brought his Bibles back before we had Bible apps. He had his
That's
actual
awesome.
physical Bible and would read it, and the nurses, and he would talk to the nurses about God, and they always said, "You are the most positive patient we have." And so he was
Wow.
such a light and made such an impact on them. And he came out of the surgery with the best attitude. So they told me I could see him, and I went in by myself, and he was like smiling. And he was like, "I thought I was paralyzed, but I'm not." He said they had put, like, it was, he found out later it was because they'd given him so much anesthetic or something. When he woke up, he
Hmm.
couldn't move. He couldn't move at all. And so he was like, thought that something went wrong in the surgery and then he was paralyzed. So when he could start feeling again, he was thankful that he had only lost his leg and that he was not paralyzed. So he was smiling and saying, "I'm not paralyzed." And he was like so happy. And then, like, yeah, it was amazing. And then things got worse because he was in so much pain that night, and they didn't get him the right pain medicine. He was screaming all night. Neither of us slept all night, and it was horrible. Like nobody should have to go through that.
Yeah.
Um, Long story short, because I got a lot more to cover. This is just a long
Hmm.
time ago. What happened? Um, he learned to walk again. We had to do a bunch of therapy at the hospital, and then he was actually on crutches July 7th when Hayden was born. He was on my, like, by my side, holding my hand on crutches. He didn't even have his prosthetic leg yet. And that was some love and dedication to be there with me while he didn't have his leg yet. So, long story short, like, we considered that the last day he had cancer for many years. And that he would have scans. I think in the beginning it was actually every 3 months, then 6 months, then every year. And he didn't have cancer for 13 years after that.
Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty amazing. And once you get to the 10-year mark, it's like a pretty high chance you're not going to get cancer again. So we were super excited
Huh.
to get
I
to
didn't
the
know that.
10. Yeah, but we knew about this cancer that if it came back, it would be in his lungs, and that would probably be it because that's what the statistics said. And it was a very, very, very low survival rate of having, like, actually he was a miracle because most people that get this cancer die within a couple of years. And so the fact
Mm.
that he lived, I think, like 14 years after, I'd have to do the exact math, but it was gone for 13 years, so about 14 since he had it, I think. the fact that he lived that long was absolutely a miracle. Like, he read some of the paperwork. He didn't tell me until later, but it said that there was like a 1% survival rate. Like, it's something crazy. It's like a very rare bone cancer, very rare. And I'm still in a Facebook group with these people with cancer, and nobody survives. Like, it's really sad.
Mm.
I've known many people in that group who have passed away. So anyway, so life goes on. He's never the same, not having his leg and super low immune system because the chemotherapy killed all his good immune system.
Mm.
So every little sickness he would get, every tiny thing. And so he had a lot of health issues between the time when he had cancer and when it came back. So it's not like it was like easy breezy 13 years, everything's great. He actually couldn't, he went back to work for a little bit. It was too hard for him with his prosthetic leg. And he never went back to work again. He tried a few things, but it didn't really work. He got to be a stay-at-home dad for a little bit, which was awesome. We went on to
Mm.
have two more kids. They were all like 20 months apart. So at one time we had three and a half and younger. And that was a crazy time.
Oh my gosh.
They were all in diapers at once.
That is
We,
a handful.
yes. So I do understand when you have little ones. Like, yes, I understand. Like, I had those crazy days, and I don't know which is worse, teenagers or toddlers. I don't know. It's a toss up. But, anyways, so we went through lots of years of lots of other health issues, many hospital stays, but it would take too long to get into all of that. But we were always thankful the cancer's gone until it was August of, I think 2017, maybe. I'd have to look exactly. But we were at this cabin. Luke's aunt and uncle had a cabin, and we were out at this baseball field and we were playing baseball as a family. That was like his favorite sport. And I remember him hitting the ball and then he fell onto the ground, onto his lungs. And actually, he thought it was his liver at the time because he also had cirrhosis, which is a whole other story. Um, and he was hurting really bad. He's like, "There's something wrong. There's something wrong." I fell on. He thought it was his liver at the time. I fell on my liver. It hurts really bad. And so when we got home, he made an appointment with liver doctor, pulmonologist, his heart. I can't remember the liver doctor. I'll remember later. Anyways, he went and they scanned his liver. They didn't see anything, but they saw a little bit of his lungs on the scan, and they saw
Mm.
cancer in his lungs. So then he had another scan to fully scan his lungs, and they found it all over his right lung, just his right lung, not his left. And that was a really devastating day because it had been 13 years without cancer. And we knew if it came back in the lungs, it was not good. I mean, I
Mm.
didn't think he was going to die in the beginning. Like, I just thought it was like, we'll get through this, just like we got through the first cancer. And I remember sitting down the kids, I think they were like 9, 11, and 13 at the time, and just talking to them like, Daddy has cancer again, but we're going to pray for a miracle. We're going to do, chemotherapy again. Luke and I decided he would never do chemotherapy again, but we had no options. Like, he didn't qualify for a clinical trial. There really was nothing else. And so we started the process again of chemotherapy. And
Mm.
this time it was not at home. Well, it wasn't at first. We tried a couple different things. We went to a specialist. She told us her regimen, and he started off with, I think it was 5 days inpatient, and then he would go home. And I remember sitting there you go to this huge room, and it's all these chairs with all these people doing chemo. It's the saddest place. Like, it is
Yeah.
so sad when you're there. And just I made him a video before that. I had all these people send me encouraging, like, messages for him. And so when he sat down to do chemo, I'm like, I have something for you. And I let him watch the video, and it was all these people, and you're such an encouragement. You've got this, and he cried when he watched it. And it was just, anyways, the point is, it was horrible. Like, I'm like, I can't believe we're back here again. Like, and I remember asking the lung doctor, what, like, how did this happen? How is it in his lungs? And he said, there was some cell somewhere in his body that remained dormant for like 13 years. And then
So it was the same cancer?
yes, it was. So people got it confused. They thought he had lung cancer. I'm like, no, it was bone cancer in his lungs. Same cancer.
Mm.
They tested it. It was the same thing. So, we looked into everything. Like you can remove one lung. We looked into that, but it would be a really hard life. He'd be on oxygen, and they said it would probably
Mm.
jump to the other lung anyways. So it was like, why go through that surgery? And that,
Yeah.
it was just like, yeah. So we went through chemo again, and then he did have a chemo where he would bring it home, and the pump would go all night, and he'd have to have it several days. He had a pack he would carry it in, kind of like a fanny pack. Um, and just like it was hard on everybody and the kids, on everybody, to go through watching dad get sick again, and he would throw up
Mm.
and he lost his hair and all the stuff, and it was so weird going through it again. Like, really, we already did this and here we are again, but way harder because I didn't have kids the first time. I was pregnant, but I didn't have any kids. So different to have to take your kids through it. And why is daddy sick? Why is he throwing up? What's happening? Is he gonna die? All this stuff. And just
Did
trying
they
to,
know that he had cancer before?
yeah, they'd heard, stories. And I had actually, in the
So,
meantime, I'd written a book, and a couple of them, the older kids, had read my book.
okay.
So they knew all about it, all the stories, but for it to be here again was
Right.
hard. And they'd also seen him sick a lot with other things. So it's not like this was
Mm.
brand new that he had health issues, but this was the hardest one. And, I remember Peyton, my youngest, so he must have been 9 at the time. So very close to Alexis's age, like asking, why doesn't God heal daddy? Why? And I remember
Mm.
explaining, we don't understand. It's kind of like God sees like this, it's like a big puzzle. There's all these puzzle pieces. We only see a tiny bit, but God sees the whole
Mm.
thing. And this is part of his plan. And we don't understand it. We may not understand. Actually, I said this to my kids today. I think we were talking about it. Because we were talking about their dad, and we may not understand until heaven, like why he got cancer. But
Yeah.
anyways, taking the kids through it was really hard when I had my own questions, but trying to be strong for them. And it was something else. It was really hard. And then it came to the place where it kept growing and growing. And it was like, now it's about quality of life. I remember looking at Luke when we were in the appointment. I think his mom was in that appointment too. And they're like, there's nothing else we can do. And I'm like, what? Like, we're just going to give up. I remember saying that. So you're just going to give up? You're like, well, it's about quality life. And then they're like, most people at your point now, they decide not to do chemo because it's not working. So then we had to make another decision. Do we keep doing chemo, or do we live? Like they were saying, it would only extend his life by a few months. And it just really was like, okay, we're done. We're done with chemo. And I think he had about a year or a year and a half after chemo, like more than they thought. And we did so much in those last couple years. We went on our first big family vacation to this
Mm.
like amusement park called Silverwood in Idaho. It was our first big trip. We went to the beach several times. The Oregon Ducks were his favorite football team, and we got like through connections, we got people who got us down on the field and free tickets. And I mean, there were so many things, Blazer games down on the, like almost to the court, because he wanted that for actually, that was his last birthday he had. Someone gave it to us.
Mm.
There were so many things. We went to Disneyland. That was a family dream forever. And actually, this is good for people to know if they are living with someone who has a terminal illness. There's a foundation called the Dream Foundation, and they grant wishes to terminal adults. There's tons for kids, but it was harder to find one for adults. And I had to have
Mm.
his doctor sign that he had less than 6 months, I think, to
Mhm.
live. And I remember showing it to him. I go, this doesn't mean I believe it. We just have to have a sign. He's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna outlive that, and he did. And we were able to go to Disneyland as a family, paid for by the Dream Foundation. So many things. We decided to just live life and just as much as we could. We went to like a month before he died. We got to go to this big, beautiful house for Easter and out on the beach. And I mean, just so many things. It was just about let's just live life. But knowing your spouse is going to die in the back of your head, like, is so hard. I know you get this, and I know a lot of our
Mhm.
audience probably gets this, that feeling of, oh my goodness, like he's going to die. And he went on hospice about 6 months before he passed away. We had an angel of a hospice nurse, Stephanie, who stepped in and was just everything I needed. And she's the one who told me, if you're going to go to the beach, you should do it now. He's starting to get worse. And he had what's called muscle wasting, where his face was starting to cave in, and just all the things that cancer
Mhm.
does. And he was starting to not look like himself anymore. I remember him crying about He was losing his strength. He was always a very strong man, and he was always, athletic, and to, losing his, he could still walk, but just all of it, I could feel his skin and his muscles and like everything
Mm.
changing. And that was hard. Like when we finally, like we realized, we would still every night until the very last night, we prayed for a miracle every single night with the kids. I would say goodnight to them when we pray for a miracle. But we also knew the miracle could come in heaven. So my kids weren't set
Hmm.
up for being totally destroyed. They knew that the miracle could come in heaven. And it did. It was not, didn't happen on earth. But we know, actually, Haley said it today. She said, but Daddy was healed. He was healed in heaven. And I was like, you're right.
Yep.
He was. He wasn't, Oh, I know why we talked about it today. Peyton said at church, they talked about in the middle school about why God doesn't answer some prayers. And it's because he has a plan and we might not understand the plan. So, anyways, he started, getting worse spring of 2020. And it was also hard because it's COVID just started. But here's the blessing, everybody was at home. My kids didn't have everything shut down. No sports, no theater, no school. So we were all together for Luke's last 3 months of life, like 24/7. I will
Wow.
never regret that. Like we looked at it, we watched, I have a whole list, I think 50 movies. Like I would, and I put it down, like write down the list every time we watched one. We watched a movie every single night together, family movie,
That's
every
cool.
night because the kids could sleep in. And um, Haley and I were supposed to go to Washington, D.C. We didn't. We would have missed a week of Luke's life near the end. I'm so glad we did. I mean, so many things that I can look at and go, like, I am so thankful that we were able to be together. And it was amazing, just amazing to have so much
Mm.
quality time his last few months. Now, he started getting a little confused at the end, and he had what's called end of life agitation, and it wasn't always peaceful, but that wasn't him.
Sure.
And that's what I would tell the kids every night. That's not him. It's the cancer and the drugs. If he would be upset about something, and, try to remember what he's really like. Um, so in May of 2020, I could tell he was getting worse and worse and worse. And it was just always that, like, my nurse would tell me, okay, I think we have a month left. I think we have a couple weeks left. And the good news was he never lost his ability to like walk. He never had an assisted bath, and he was a very proud man. Like he would not, the thought, he would cry. The thought of like, I don't ever want you to have to take care of me. I don't ever want you to have to do that. Like it would have destroyed him mentally. Like it would have. And I'm so thankful. I mean, we had everything. The hospice nurse brought everything like to the closet, like a catheter, like all these things we might need. And she's like, I don't want him to know they're here, but like if we ever need them, they're here. He
Yeah.
was able to fully eat, fully do everything. So his last night was May 22nd, 2020. We had a great, I think we watched a family show. We had a family hug. We'd never had like a group hug, I don't think ever, but he was in the boys' room saying goodnight. And then Haley was in there, I was in there, and the dog was in there. And we all hugged, totally God, and said goodnight. We love you, all that stuff. And then now looking back, I can see the
Mm.
next thing that happened was a total, complete miracle. The kids had gone to bed, and Luke would stay up late, but he kept telling me, I just feel off today. Like he said that so many times that day. And actually, I want to back up. I put this in my notes. I wanted to share about 2 days before he died. He was sitting in his recliner and he was crying. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I just want to tell you that I am so thankful for you. You're an amazing wife. Thank
Mm.
you for never leaving me. Thank you for never
Wow.
leaving me. Yeah, it was really special. And I held his hand and I was crying and I said, God chose me for this. Like, I'm going to hold your hand till the very end. I'm here for you.
Wow.
And it was just this beautiful moment. It's kind of like my nurse was saying, it's not that they really know, but some subconsciously somehow, like he knew he was saying all of these things. So, anyways, the last night, I said, why don't you come to bed with me? It was like 11 o'clock, and he'd usually stay up till midnight because he had to take a pill at midnight. Anyways, he came and we started just watching some silly TV show and cuddling in bed. And then he was like, so you have to know this about him. He never ever asked me to make him food. He liked to make his own food, eat up until the end. But he said, could you make me a grilled cheese sandwich? And I was like, sure, why not? And so I remember going in the kitchen and making it just how I knew he would like it. And bringing out, and I ate something too, and he ate his grilled cheese sandwich, and we were just laughing at the show, and I was like, this is our best date we've ever had. And he's like, yeah, I think it is. And it was just this beautiful evening. Like, it's crazy now thinking about it. And then when we were about to go to bed, he said, my leg's really hurting. I was like, I'm sorry. He's like, I think it's these exercises I did. So the nurse had said you should do these calf exercises because it will help strengthen so you don't lose your strength in your legs as soon. So he went overboard and did like 100, I don't know, something crazy. And so he thought it was from that. And he's like, it's really hurting. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. And it looks swollen to me. And I'm like, we should probably maybe call tomorrow about that. And we went to bed, and it was four something in the morning. I woke up to a light being turned on. He was in the hall closet, and he's like, I need some medicine. I need some Tylenol or something. My leg's really hurting. I'm like, okay, lay down. I'll get it for you. And so this is the emotional part.
Mm.
So I got him some Tylenol, and then he asked me to get him a heating pad for his leg, and then he asked me to get him ice. I got him all these things. I'm like, I'm gonna call hospice and see what's going on. And as I'm calling hospice, he starts like hyperventilating, and I thought it was a panic attack. And I'm pretty sure that's what he thought it was too, because he asked me to get him his lorazepam, which he called chill pill. Get me my chill pill. And that's what he called it. And he's like, stick it under my tongue. And I think he thought he was panicking too. I actually don't want to get into every little detail because it's too much, but he ended up like just not being able to breathe while I was on the phone with hospice. I'm like, well, I called because of his calf hurting, but he's not breathing well. And they wanted to hear his breathing, and they said, go get the oxygen. So I ran and got the oxygen and put it on. So meanwhile, my kids are still asleep. They don't hear any of this. Totally God's protection. Nobody saw him suffer but me. And he started, like not being able to breathe, his eyes rolling back in his head. And I didn't think this was it until that moment, until I saw this. And then it was like, this is it. Like, I was so confused, like, what's happening? I had no idea what was happening. And thankfully, and actually, Hayden told me later that he was awake. He saw the door shut. I don't remember shutting the door. And he saw the oxygen going through the hall, but that he didn't go in there. And he would have seen suffering if he did. And Luke just was like very labored breathing, and it was very scary. And the nurse, I said, should I wake up my kids? Do you think this is it? And he's like, yeah, I think you should. And so as I'm going to wake, yeah, it's crazy just thinking back. I haven't actually thought about this in a really long time, like the details. And somehow God kept me calm the whole time. Like when he wasn't breathing very well, and I was just saying, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, just trying to comfort him. And while I left to go get the kids, when we came, I told them, it's Daddy's probably going to heaven. Like, we need to say goodbye. And I remember Haley screaming, no, it's not time yet. It's not time, because they thought there was going to be this progression that we were told about. This will happen, and this will happen, more of like a progression that Lacey went through, like that happens normally.
You're looking for the signs.
Yes, there's signs. Yep. So anyways, when we get back to the room, calm breathing. They never saw him suffering. It was like God totally stopped that before they saw him, which I am so thankful, because it's hard enough for me to get out of my head. I don't want them to have that. So they never saw that part of it, which is totally God protecting them. So my kids at the time were 12, 14, and 15. Yes. So they come into the room, and his eyes are already like locked to the side, and his eyes are wide open, and he's just kind of slow breathing at that time. And I had somehow remembered to call his mom. I called my parents. So people were on the way, and we just started singing to him and talking to him. And I said, talk to him, he can hear you. And I remember saying things to him like, you're gonna meet my grandparents today. You're gonna see your grandparents, and like
Wow.
just telling him all the people he was gonna see because I knew this was it. Um, and I was able to talk to my hospice nurse even though she was off duty, and we did a FaceTime, and she wanted to see him, and she said, "Yeah, this is it, and I want you to give him whatever that no, I don't remember the medicine. Um,
Haloperidol.
that one, yep." And she wanted me to give it to him, and Haley helped me, and the kids told me later that they thought that was going to make him better, but it was
Mm,
just to make him relax, and so it would be
mm-hmm.
easier for him. And we just talked to him. I don't remember everything we said. It's a blur. Um, Haley saying "You Are My Sunshine."
Mm.
That was their song. Ever since she was a baby, he would sing it to her, call her my little sunshine. And the boys talk. I just remember Peyton going, "I love you, Daddy. You're the best, Daddy. I love you." And
Mm.
Hayden talking to him, and me talking to him. And then his mom got there, and she sang to him. And so she was on one side, so he was surrounded by his mom and his family, and then it's all kind of like blurry in my head. But then I don't know why I had my phone, and somehow I decided to play the song "I Can Only Imagine." If you haven't
Mm.
heard it, I'll put a link in the description. It's a beautiful song about heaven. And as I was playing the song and we all sang it to him, he stopped breathing. He took his last
Wow.
breath and moved to heaven during the song "I Can Only Imagine." Like, the timing is only God, that during that song he actually went from imagining heaven to heaven. And I'm also going to share in a minute that a vision that God gave me later about that moment for him. Um, and then my parents got there, and it was a blur, and it was all the kids kissed him goodbye, um, and then I laid on the bed with him and just touched him and cried, and it just didn't
Wow.
seem real, to watch someone's, like you said yesterday, when like someone's soul departs. It's like he wasn't there. But I just wanted those last few minutes. I just laid with him and just sobbed. And my mom tried to comfort me, and then she's like, "I think you should go." Instead of sitting there, she's like, "He's not there anymore." And we left, and yeah, it was a crazy, crazy emotional experience. But I want to share this part because I think this can help people. I know I shared it with you, and you said it helped you, about
Mm-hmm.
this vision that God gave me about the moment when he was dying. And so a few months later, I went to a grief retreat, and God gave me a vision. And the vision was actually the whole death experience, but it was as if I was Luke. So just like you said, sometimes you hesitate to tell your stories. This one I have not. Actually, there's probably a lot of people that know me that are listening that have not heard this story because it's so personal and it feels like people won't believe it. But it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So God showed me what Luke experienced. Like, this is pretty crazy. It's a gift that God gave me. So I, was having this vision, and I was asking, so the question you ask when you're like focusing and talking to God is like, where were you in this painful experience? And first he showed me that I did not shut the door. He did, like God or an angel or somebody shut the door so Hayden didn't see the stuff going on. So, because
Oh
I don't
wow.
remember shutting it. So God or an angel or somebody shut the door, or I did it with God's hand. I don't know. So first, that was the first thing that he showed me. And then I kind of went through the whole experience. But then I floated and like landed in Luke's body in this vision. And all of a sudden, it was the most peaceful feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. I cannot explain it. And these are the thoughts that went through my head: I have no pain. I have no pain. And it was like completely peaceful, like completely peaceful. And then I remember hearing Haley singing "You Are My Sunshine," like all of this stuff, but as if
Mm.
I'm Luke, and it was completely peaceful. Like he was not in pain, he was not worried. And then he said in his mind, "I'm okay to leave my family," which was huge because he hated that thought. I can't leave you. I can't leave you.
Yeah.
And thinking as a parent and as a spouse, like I would feel the same way too. Like I wouldn't want to leave. And he thought in his head, I'm okay to leave. And then this is the coolest part. So in like real life, not the vision, his eyes were pointed to the corner, to the ceiling. And in the vision, Jesus was sitting up in the corner, like just sitting there, kind of watching over the whole thing. And then I remember, yeah, it's amazing. Like I couldn't have made this stuff up. Like it was so vivid and so clear. I wouldn't have made this up. And then I remember hearing the song, I Can Only Imagine. And then I remember Jesus saying, it's time to go. And then like kind of like going up out of Luke's body into kind of like a light and then following Jesus. And that's where my vision ended. But I was able to experience it as him and know that he was not in pain. He was not struggling because, of course, the whole time, it was probably about an hour and a half that we were with him on the bed when he was dying and wondering, what is he thinking right now? Oh, and he did struggle to speak like before this. Like he kept saying, I. And I said, it's okay. We know that you love us. We know. I know that's what he was trying to say. And I also remember saying to him, you're going to hear today, well done, my good and faithful servant. And just like talking so calmly to him, like I didn't lose it until after he died. Somehow God gave me the strength to remain calm for my kids, remain calm for him. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful experience. His death was a beautiful miracle. Most people don't have that. We were blessed. Like my nurse was like, this is not, we thought because he's young and he was on so many pain meds, we thought he was going to have the most excruciating death that like you wouldn't even want the kids there. Like we thought it was going to be so bad. And so she's like, this is actually what I prayed for, that it would be something like this. And so although it hurt because it was not expected, it was a shock. And also, just so you know, it was actually a blood clot. I found out later. It was like a blood clot that traveled from his calf, they say either to his lungs or to his heart. And if it was the lungs, he couldn't survive because there was so much cancer. And then if the heart, it just made him pass away. So the good news is he skipped all that end of life stuff, which is so horrible. And the kids didn't have to see him that way. I didn't have to see him that way. And we were able to, get past that. And yeah, so that's just taking us up until he passed away. And I wanted to just share, just to wrap it up here in a little bit about like the grieving process and what it's been like since then. My husband was 42 when he passed away. And I remember, just waking up then the next morning thinking like, this can't be real. And just being in a complete fog and a complete blur and a complete like feeling like, how is life ever going to be better? But I'm telling you, 11 months later, it's way better. But just the grieving process, it's waves. It's not, I never went through, and I think you said this too, like I never went through all the stages and all the stuff. Like it's been different. I'd never had an angry face. I think you said you didn't either.
Correct.
Maybe God let us skip that and just have peace, and just the first few months really felt like survival and like learning to live again, like with part of you missing, you know, it's like, I think I said this in a live, but I want to share it here, that it's like an amputation. You learn to live without the person, but you're never the same. Like you're always going to miss them. It's an adaptation. And so the last 11 months have been hard. The first few were really hard, but I really dove into grief work. And this is what I want to encourage people to do. I got involved in 8 months of grief work online with a grief counselor. But what I wanted to encourage, it's free. This is what I want to tell everybody. There's a program called Grief Share, and it's done usually at churches, and it's a free program. When I needed it, it was all online, and I wanted to be like with people. I didn't end up going to, but then I found this other grief group, and that worked for me. So go, like just type in Google Grief Share, and you can find the locations, and they're free. And it's an amazing resource for everybody who wants to do some grief work. But one of the most important things, and I know you've heard me say it a million times, that I learned in my grieving is what you feel, you can heal. So don't ever stop. Like if you're starting to feel your grief emotions, just let them flow. Like I don't care where you're at. I've cried in the bookstore, the grocery store, that, like, oh, that's his favorite food, blah, 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 like everywhere. All of it. Like let yourself feel it. So I have another counselor I see too, and she said it's like constipation if you don't get the grief out, like because one of my kids is having a harder time getting out. So I was explaining this to him that it's like you're constipated. If you don't get it out, like you're gonna explode one day. And so let
Yeah.
yourself feel it. Talk about it. Like talk about your grief. Find a trusted person. Talk through your story. This is healing to talk through it. And I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I learned is to really talk through it, find a community. We're trying to build a community here with Widow Too Soon, get connected on our Instagram. We're going to have a Facebook page soon, connect with other people that are going through similar things. And then for
Hmm.
me, God was my biggest rock. Jesus. He also showed me one more thing on the grief retreat, and it was a vision of Jesus saying he was proud of me and like placing this crown on my head with all these jewels and saying, I chose you out of all the people in the world, all the girls, because like Luke was really, really attractive and a lot of girls liked him and chased him and all this stuff. But he, like, out of everybody in the whole world, like, I chose you. Like, I chose you to walk by his side because at first, I'd be like, why me? Why did my husband have to die? Da, 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 da,
Hmm.
da. And he's like, no, I chose you. And it changed everything in my head, everything. And I was like, yeah, I was chosen. Like I got to walk him all the way. Like I said, I told him I would, and I was 100% faithful, whole marriage, and walked him to the end, held his hand. 16 years of sickness, like 16 years, held his hand till the very end. And God told me, Jesus told me in this vision, I am proud of you. And that was huge. He also told me during that retreat, he gave me a vision. He gave me so many visions. Um, I grew up at this camp that I would go to every summer, and it was like my favorite place in the world. And I got a vision of me running across this field, and God said, I'm going to restore you back to that. I'm going to restore your life back to the joy of your youth, because I used to be like the most fun person and like so like carefree. And then the weight of all of this for so many years was on me. And so I feel it. I can feel it coming back. Still there's a lot of hard times, but I can feel laughter a lot more often, having fun a lot more often. And, he just really poured into me. One of my verses that really helped me is Isaiah 4:32. When you go through deep waters, I will
Hmm.
be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the oppression, you will not burn, but the flames will not consume you. That was huge. And then this one, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are
Hmm.
crushed in spirit. There's a lot of verses about widows, also including widowers, that God takes care of them. And it's so true. Like he has a special place in his heart for us. If you're a widow or widower listening, know that God will take care of you. Like there's so many things that have happened. God provided a brand new house I moved into last week that did not look like it was going to happen. He provided
Hmm.
a job. I mean, it's like so many things that I can look at and be like, whoa, like God is totally faithful. I remember after Luke died, just praising God and crying in my room and just like feeling God's closeness like so much. And he also gave me a vision like 2 months or a month before Luke died of Luke running in heaven. He looked like he did in high school and he was happy and it was just beautiful. And it was like a vision of what he looks like now in heaven. And God has been right there with me. Another thing I wanted to share is don't be surprised if you have anxiety for the first time. I had never had anxiety, but I actually read a book about it called Anxiety, the Forgotten Stage of Grief. And especially if you've witnessed a death, it can change everything for you, but know that you will get through it. My anxiety used to be really high in the beginning, and it's very rare now that I get total anxiety about things like I used to. Like I used to think I was dying a lot. So
Hmm.
just know that you can get through that. Another verse, we actually were talking about this. This was your verse too. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That came up as a memory today on Facebook. That was also a verse
Oh
that
wow.
I was really clinging to at that time. It was that, lean not on your own understanding. I still feel like that as a widow trying to figure out my future. Lean not on your own understanding. Like, because there's so many, as a single person with single parent, and there's all these questions, and you question yourself as a parent, and you question the future, and blah 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 blah. It's the same thing. Like, lean not on your own understanding. I'm going to put a link to these songs, like 3 songs that really helped me. There's a song called, I think it's just called Jesus by Mosaic, and it's beautiful. It's just basically saying Jesus over and over. And I used to just listen to that. I remember crying on the bathroom floor when Luke was sick, knowing he was going to die any day, and just listening to that. You Make Beautiful Things by Gungor. That's one of my favorite things. It's basically based on the verse, you make beauty out of ashes. And God
Mm.
doesn't waste pain. Know that whatever you're going through, God will use it. He doesn't waste your pain. Like, you didn't just go through this thing for nothing. He can use it to make something beautiful in your life, or be something beautiful for someone else. Like what Mark and I went through. Now we're able to share it with you, and we're able to, be able, to just share it, and hopefully it helps you. And then this is like my newer favorite, and even the name, it's called Graves into Gardens by Elevation Worship. And literally about God taking graves and making them into gardens. And like, I've listened to that while at Luke's grave. And like, it's just that he can take these things and just make them beautiful. And there's a line in that
Mm.
song that says, "You turn my mourning to dancing." And I've danced to that so many times. Like, yes, God, you've turned my mourning to dancing. And, you know, it's not easy what we've been through or what we're currently going through, but God is faithful. Like, I really want to encourage everyone, like, press into God. Well, what does that mean? I don't want to just use like Christianese language. It means like just talking to Him. Like, we get to talk to the God of the universe like anytime that we want, and just praying and just, Jesus, help me. And He will meet you there. He will listen. He does listen to every prayer. I talk to Him all the time. It is not about religion, it is about a relationship. And I talk to Him in the car a lot, like on walks, on runs, like all the time. Like, He is close to the brokenhearted and crushed in spirit. And a lot of you listening are probably right there. And so just know that He hears your prayers. And He, if you're not even sure where to start, like with reading the Bible, get the Bible app. It's called YouVersion. If you've never heard of it, on your phone, and there's verse of the day. Just start there. Um, if you want us to pray for you, reach out to us. We would love to pray for you and help you along your journey. We're here to help you. And yeah, I think that's like most of it, what I wanted to share. Um, did you have any questions or anything, Mark?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, my earpods died, sorry. Wow, that's a crazy story.
Yeah.
It's intense. It's so hard to fathom because our journey was like a little over a year, and so it's hard to wrap my head around. That was most of your marriage.
Yep. 16 out of 17 years. Yeah. Or more than that. 16 and a half out of 17.
That's hard to wrap my head around. What
Yeah.
what would you say was like the hardest season in that for you?
For
Like for
sure.
you, I know there were different hard parts for Luke.
Um, for sure the end. For sure.
Mm.
Just knowing that he was close to the end, and like bracing yourself. Like, there's this thing called anticipatory grief, where it's like you're on a train that's going full blast and it's going to hit a wall, and it, so you're just bracing yourself. And so that's what I had, a lot of anticipatory grief. And so for sure, that bracing myself for death, because I had to read all these books about what it's going to be like and all this stuff, and you're just like, okay, I'm trying to prepare, but you're never fully prepared. That's what my nurse told me, like, you're never fully prepared. So I would say for sure that is definitely the hardest part, the hardest season.
Oh. And how are your 3 children doing now?
They're doing pretty well. It's actually amazing. So Haley is really into music. She's written a lot of songs. She sang at her dad's celebration of life and graveside service. And actually, when I left the house, she was writing another one. And so she expresses herself through music. She's doing pretty well. It's hard because she was daddy's girl. I worried about her the most, but she's doing really good.
Mm.
Peyton's more quiet and keeps it to himself, but he seems to be thriving and doing well. And then Hayden also does music, and he's written some songs about his dad, and he does basketball. In fact, he's out of practice right now. And so yeah, we just moved into a brand new house that they love. We went from 3 rooms to 5, and I just feel so blessed to have a guest room, and every kid has their own room, which the boys have shared their whole life. So yeah, they're doing pretty good. I mean, considering, and also my nurse told me a lot. She's like, you did such great prep work with them. Like, you prepared them. They did the, anticipatory grief. It wasn't like a shock to them. Of course, it's hard. There are certain moments, like even today, getting basketball shoes for Hayden. He wanted his dad, and there's just moments. But I would say, like, overall, doing pretty good.
Mm.
So
Wow, that's
yeah,
great. Praise God for that.
yeah, it's definitely been a journey, but yeah, so that's my story. And to all the listeners out there, if you want to ask for a prayer request, you could email us at widowed2 with the number 2, widowed too soon m, because we didn't have it without the m, that wasn't available. Widowed too soon m, like in Mark and Michelle, at gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram, widowed too soon _ and we'd love to hear from you, pray for you, and connect with you. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Now that you've heard both of our stories, it's going to be more interactive, more of a discussion, and we'll be excited to talk to you then. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that with us.
All right, see you guys later. Bye. Okay, I'm going to stop this one and then talk to you on the